up, world? It's Willy. What if here? I've missed you all so much. I can't wait to finish this story and get to all new videos for you all. I know I have a lot of explaining to do, but please let me finish my favorite story. First, Chapter 55, Groundwork. Chapter text: Ochako wasn't okay. She wasn't horrible or in active danger or destitution, but she certainly wasn't in the mood to keep going with the shitty status quo that her life had been for weeks. First, it had been that outbreak of those stupid giant gangs tearing stuff up downtown, which took days to file all the paperwork for. Then she needed to stay behind so the commission board could review her, and that led in turn to going to a damn shrink. All of which left her with barely any time to unwind and relax. It was only recently today that she even made it back home for a day off, and even then, it left her anxious and more than a little pissed off. That whole debacle from Katsuki during the reunion was ugly enough, and now all she had to show for everything was her fluffy pink robes and a bucket of ice cream. She wasn't even sure if calling up Miko and Zuki was a good idea since she was so pissy at everything. Sighing, she stuffed another spoonful of cheesecake-flavored sweetness into her maw. There wasn't a lot to do, and thankfully she had another 4 days off. But damn, did everything suck. If it wasn't one thing, it was another with life. She wanted to lounge about like a bum for a month without that overhanging dread of more work looming on the horizon, which made it impossible to truly relax. Shutting her eyes, Ochako took a moment to take in what could be done to make herself feel a little better, when out of the blue her phone rang. Snapping her eyes open and cursing life itself, she reached over to the coffee table and turned on. The screen? It was Miko, just exactly what she fucking needed. Growling at the stress she knew was coming, Ochako pushed down the resentment and answered as politely as she could. "Hey Miko, everything all right?" The sound wasn't what she expected. It was something akin to a mix between a squeaky giggle and a built-up cry. However, Ochako knew the woman was in one of her heights of mania, which could range from hilarious, to horrifying to her needing to head down there and help. "Hey Chiki, I called because I wanted to thank you." The heroine raised an eyebrow at the response, but rolled with it like her training taught her. "Thank me for what exactly?" Another giggle came from the speaker, as Himiko audibly tried to control herself, sounding somewhere between drunk and excited. "For letting me have the chance to get what I wanted. Zuzu had a look at my file yesterday, and he accepted it. He learned the worst things I'd ever done, and he loved me all the same. He said it didn't matter and that I'm not that person anymore. God fucking damn it. I found what I had been looking for since I was a teenager, and it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect, and it's all thanks to you." Despite herself, Ochako had a smile at that, managing to feel a little better. "Well, I always knew you could do it. Granted, you had some rough patches in life and made a few big mistakes, but you're the one who made all this happen, Miko. I just gave you a hand to help you get better." The giggling subsided somewhat, gaining a hint of more lucidity. "I know, but it all seems so unreal. After all the bad I've done, I finally have what I wanted for so long." And a sigh came from the blonde as her voice became almost depressive, with vindictiveness. "I know this is a bad way of thinking, but I can't help feeling so damn angry that this couldn't have happened before I went nuts. Maybe I could have been something completely different instead of, you know what? It doesn't matter. I have you and I have Zuzu, so everything's good. I just wanted to let you know how much you giving me that second chance means to me, especially now. So if you ever need anything, let me know." The heroine bathed in the warmth coming from her chest, glad to know she had made a difference to someone who needed it above all else. "I will, Miko. Just let me know if you ever need to talk." The villainess sounded an octane happier, likely bathing in her own warmth for a moment before it came crashing down into something bordering on depressive. "You got my word, Cheeks, but should I be worried that he said he needed some time to get his head on straight?" Now the heroine raised another eyebrow. "Not really. Most people would need some time to process something like that, but since he openly came back, it shouldn't worry you given everything else he's accepted about your past." An exhausted sigh came over the line, making a mental picture of the girls, emotions breaking and chipping like they tended to do at her worst days. "I know. Zuzu's shown how much he loves me, and I love him just as much. It's just hard not having him around all the time." For an instant, Ochako felt a sliver of ire and contempt for the woman creeping up her blood. Yet she forced it away and breathed deeply to calm herself. "Miko, you gotta have faith in him the same way he does with you. Besides, if all he's asking 4 is a few days alone to think, then it's more than fair to tolerate it given all the crazy shit you put him through. The shapeshifter had a slight reckoning to her voice, only for it to die quickly after. You're right, I just hate being alone. Again, it isn't the same without him here. She continued as a wave of wary dread came over her voice. I had a whole lifetime of being alone, one where I had to hide my issues behind a mask and couldn't even do the one simple thing that would have fixed most of it. Then I make unforgivable. Mistake after mistake trying to find someone who'll love me for who I am, and only after I lost the closest things I had to family, I discover the person I was hoping for. Somebody just as nuts as me and loves me almost as much as I love them. Blood and all. Himiko paused, her knuckles cracking over the line. Cheeky, have you ever been so obsessed with someone that they become your whole world, and only to have that thrown right back at you with equal vigor? To know that person loves you more than life itself, and see how they thrive at your attention, and adore how you do the same in theirs? I've known him for over 1.5 years, and I've never been more complete or more content. I just feel like I need him, if that makes sense. The silent fury grew at the words. Ochako, being able to know, longer suppressed the scowl building under her face. How long had it been where she needed to work her ass off for the world, while this bitch got to scuttle off and get sweet with that green-haired boy toy of hers? Ochako felt her fingers grip the phone and causing it to lose all weight in her hand before she pulled back and measured what her thoughts contained. She felt her temper cool somewhat. It wasn't their fault that work had been so thoroughly up her ass, and in all fairness, she hadn't reached out much herself. It does, but don't. Freak out about it. Zuki's like any other person, meaning he needs space from time to time. Just relax and everything will be okay. He did the same for you, didn't he? Himiko was silent, clearly taking it all in until she managed to find something to say. He did, and I suppose I'm being clingy, but it's hard even with the assurance that he'll come back. The mind does funny stuff to me and I always assume the worst. Crap. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear me bitch with so much else on your plate. For once, the brunette was almost inclined to agree, only she kept that to herself and tried to remain collected. You're fine, Miko. Who the hell else can you talk to about this? Just keep calm and don't let yourself spiral, okay? A second passed. Then the bloodsucker answered back in what might have been a better mood. Thanks, Cheeks. I'm gonna clear my head and try not act crazy. Love ya. The call abruptly, leaving Ochako in the relative silence of her apartment as she was stuck, staring at the screen. Somehow that pissed her off even more. Then if the bitch kept talking, really, who just writes someone off like that? Putting her device away, the heroine returned her attention to the bowl of ice cream at her elbow. Sweetness filled her mouth and lessened the bitter anger in her chest by a sliver as her mind began to spin. It was good that Himiko had found someone to put up with all her crazy and the horrible things of her past, but she was feeling selfish and more than a little like she had been put on a shelf. Suddenly, her teeth felt denser somehow and made her peel her lips back. The urge to just hit something erupted in her. Why the fuck did that cunt get to let out all her emotions and have a man willing to accept all her fucked up life? Didn't she have a place in there between them? Her fingers clasped on the spoon in a tight fist as a petulant fury built up inside her. She wanted to scream and shout for attention and intimacy like she was the spoiled brat all her peers got to be, instead of the rock that was forced to grow up so damn early. Stewing in her vomitous emotions, Ochako sealed the dessert and made her way to the fridge to put it back as she gained a handle on her impulses. She was a hero, so she had to hold herself to a higher standard, even if that made her absolutely embittered on the inside. Looking around, she stared at the emptiness of her home in contempt for all she had to suffer to get it. Quietly, she cursed fate for the catch assigned to her dream and crossed her arms, while standing by the counter. Yet, as if to break the source of her dread, a knock erupted from her front door. Stepping towards it, she looked through the peephole to find Izuku of all people standing on the other side. Undoing the locks, the door was opened where the quirkless man stood with a strange storm of emotion in his eyes. One of utmost mania and the same desperate bleeding of help that she'd seen countless times in her life. When they were face to face, he managed a weak smile as his right hand traveled to a small notebook in his pocket, tapping soundlessly. Hey, Rosie, you got a minute? I've had a hell of a day and figured you might be in need of some company. Exacerbation teased at the edge of her eyes, yet she was glad for the distractions, so she turned around and gestured for him to come inside. Few steps later, he shut the door behind him, letting Ochako to gaze at the man as he stood with what had to be a weight upon his shoulders. It was perplexing, but given what Miko told her, there wasn't much of a stretch to assume why he came over. Still, she gave him time to collect himself and take in his appearance. He was still unreasonably toned and cute in a slightly timid direction. However, the air was slightly different from before. Now there was a clear conflict in his eyes that came to a head when he leveled them at her plainly. I learned some of what Himiko had done in her private time when she was a teen, and I figured I could ask a few things, because right now my head is still kind of spinning, namely at what possessed you to hop into bed with us when you knew firsthand what she did. Ochako considered what was asked and found the answer rather easy to get, with how finished she was at everything. Crossing her arms again, she responded almost casually before moving past towards the kitchen. I was drunk, lonely, and you two were the only bed I had. Ergo, I decided to end that dry spell with the chick who owed me her life and the guy crazy. Enough to stick around her. Now here's my fucking question. Why the hell are you still with her if those facts about the past bother you so much? Izuku seemed to want to throw back an insult of some kind, but he also emotionally collapsed and looked back just as tired. That's the thing, it doesn't. I still want everything about her. You, on the other hand, are a different matter. I understand wanting to help her reform, and maybe even being a close friend after so long. But to jump into a situation like that, given the history between you two, it leaves me puzzled. The heroine regarded him callously, walking with none of the usual patience she always held. A scowl filled her face, and she glared with her fury actually showing for once. Listen here, you masochistic fucker. I have sacrificed my entire life for this society and have nothing to show for it except a fat bank account. Everything else in my existence went to shit, and that nasty freak, and you were the only options I had for any enjoyment that wouldn't end apocalyptically. Even then, the powers that be stripped away some of my reins over her case. But I can keep going on. Her fist shook at her side, and she spoke through clenched teeth with the emotional fire inside leaking out. I can keep my shitty job without being alone with people I keep seeing as shattered. Izuku, I've been alone for so damn long it hurts, and honestly, she wasn't my first choice. You were. But I wasn't about to do that to someone who had already lost more than me, and I knew how serious you both were about each other. I just want to have something. Anything that doesn't require me to save the fucking day. Screams came from her now, as months of repression came clean. I'm not just Doravity, I'm Ochako Uraraka, but nobody wants that. Everybody either wants the famous hero or the shoulder to fucking lean on all the damn time. For years, it's been the same shit, and nothing changes for the better. Everyone I know is so fucked up or greedy that I can't be normal. I can't be me. For fuck's sake, I'm only 25. The whole world doesn't need me to carry it a damn tissue. When it ended, she was left breathless, but very much still enraged. Izuku stared at her in shock, more taken aback by the sudden shift than anything else. Blinking, he inhaled and remained as blunt from the drain of today's events. Is there anything I can do for you? She leveled a near lifetime worth of anger and practically ran forward, sending a curled fist into his belly. Izuku recoiled from the blow, but remained standing as the right was followed by the left, making it hurt more. Ochako raised another fist, but stopped and stepped back, not feeling apologetic in the least. She breathed through huge, heaving breaths of air and continued to glare like he had personally wronged her. Shut the fuck up and let me beat the hell out of you so I don't feel so shitty. Izuku squinted, but sighed and lifted his shirt up to reveal his charred and slash-mark-covered torso. The tap word is pineapple. Ochako brought her arm back with nothing but her held-in grudges controlling her. Pineapple got it. One punch collided with his sternum, and in the next came on just above the belt. On and on she went, beating with wild abandon as her petulant rages came out. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime to her, she stopped and felt something akin to relief. All while Izuku regarded her stoically despite the growing welts blending with his already ruined skin. Better? She nodded as the red faded away from her vision. Yeah, thanks for that, by the way. He shrugged, reaching down to his discarded shirt and bundling under his arm. Anytime, although an ice pack would be fine. Turning around, she fetched one wordlessly from the freezer and placed it on his torso, keeping a curious eye on him regardless. So, what does Miko usually do after all of that? The man breathed and winced slightly, shifting the ice pack around. As he answered casually, Usually she'll be clingy as a bear and let me feel her up or some such. Why? Ochako said nothing for a moment, feeling as awkward as could be given what she just did. It was a mix of honest shame and near teen-like displacement. She turned her gaze to the floor and blushed a little. Do you want to do that with me? Izuku raised an eyebrow in response, almost seeming amused at the statement with a sprinkling of earnest temptation glowing behind the stoicism he held on to. Yet he grabbed the ice pack from her and sat down on the sofa, the offer already dead. In the air, not without Himiko here. His eyes dragged down to the notebook in his pocket as his fingers fished it out. Raising it up, he stared at the thing with a far heavier significance than one normally would. A thumb ran across the cover in a near-compulsive means, and soon he dropped the ice pack to grab a pen from his left pocket. The cover was opened, and he began to write for a few seconds, before looking back at the heroine with crazy eyes. Would you mind if I tell you about an idea I'm having? She was taken slightly aback by the frenzy in his gaze that was coupled by a slowly encroaching smile, but had her curiosity aroused at the novelty of it all. Wasn't like she was doing much to begin with. Taking a seat next to him on the recliner, she made herself comfortable and ready to hear whatever insanity he had in store. Sure, what are you thinking about? Izuku practically glowed at that, studying the already filled pages of the notebook before shifting to stare at her. His writing hand popped at the knuckles from the excitement she could see from within. Have you ever stopped to consider why we haven't colonized space yet, even with all the insane stuff we can do? The brunette curled her brow at him, taking the question for what had to be the first time ever. Soon her brain began to actually pick away at the idea like it was a concept that should have been there, but wasn't. No, I hadn't. Why? White teeth. Shine through the manic smile sent her way, paper flipping through the tiny notebook. Because I think we should, and I want to be the one to get us there. Pride came bursting from every word, making the man seem even more intoxicated on his own. Thoughts. Oddly, Ochako found it rather cute while her mind jumbled the pieces into place. Okay, how exactly? Getting something like that to happen isn't easy or simple, nor is it cheap. His green eyes stared at her with indignation, like she said the most ignorant thing imaginable. Ochako, you can literally reverse the effect of gravity to anything if you just touch it. Katsuki can literally fire rocket-grade explosions from his palm with his sweat and a spark, and I know a woman who can literally make plant life grow with a touch. It has never been easier than now to make this happen. There's thousands, maybe millions of people all around the world who would jump at the opportunity to make the next step of mankind. A bitterness crept over his brow as he muttered under his breath. Of course it'd be easier if I'd gotten that damn. He shook his head and regarded the woman plainly. Point being that our society is damn near stagnant compared to most modern eras, and it's killing us. I don't have a problem with the hero model despite all the bullshit that comes along with it, but we have the same kind of tech from a century ago. Robotic limbs are the best we've come up with, and that was from before the emergence, so unless something dramatic happens, we'll keep wasting our potential. I mean, don't you think your talents could be spent better doing something other than stopping criminals? You're clearly fed up with the job. Maybe you need something new to focus on. That plucked a chord in her, and suddenly she had concepts of her own. There came a flood of old fantasies that roared into life, causing her to get up from the recliner and head to her bedroom for a moment. Scanning the shelves along the wall where her TV hung, she began to grab book after book and cradle them in her arms, very much so feeling nostalgic and innocently good, like she had whenever she dipped into the worlds nestled by her chest. Coming back to the living room, she set them down rather neatly, with a sense of reverence for how much they helped her escape bad times. Dune, Hyperion, Star Trek, Isaac Asimov, Star Wars, and more. They each helped shape her as much as her love of animation. Granted, there was never much of a time to discuss them since nobody really knew them well enough other than Mina, and she'd only dig at the surface level rather than process what they represented and taught. Sitting back down in the chair, Ochako had a certain giddiness about her that was so pleased to be let out and made her start asking questions aplenty. What's your goal going to look like? Will we be colonizing space itself? Terraforming planets into something Earth-like? Crafting space stations with quirks and using the solar system as bases to laugh from and bring resources back to Earth? Have you considered a Dyson sphere into the plan? Izuku blinked at the questions, flipping open his notebook. He scanned a few pages and tried to surmise as best he could. I plan to start out by gaining enough people willing to be involved with the concept, probably by making it into a non-profit organization and collecting donations to put toward the further steps of the project. We might even petition the government for some scientific funding and see where that takes it. That aside, when the space to begin experimentation is bought, I want to focus on the potential for quirks and how that can help bring it forward. He pursed his lips and reread a line on the page, his pen flicking between his fingers. Overall, my goal would be to get awareness of space travel into the public's mind. But specifically, I'd have to say I'd set my sights on Mars and make it livable somehow, while also having a consistent and safe line of transport to Earth. Although the space station one sounds like a good in-between, words began to spill out in a muttering mess as he became lost in his own thoughts, making Ochako practically feed off his energy. She liked the idea. It may not be completely possible in her lifetime, or perhaps it could be if enough hands worked at it. But that prospect was more intriguing than what she was saddled with currently. Turning the gears in her head, the brunette found something she might actually be able to help with. What if I use my hero name to advertise it? That would help turn some heads and get people talking. Izuku turned his head to her, snapping out of his trance like she had said something taboo in the extreme. He inhaled, discomfort clear as day on his face. Not that I wouldn't appreciate the help. Some people might get turned off by the mission if a hero was attached to it by name. The goal is to reach as many people as possible, most of which I believe would have disgruntled feelings towards the current system. If you want to help, then be Ochako Uraraka, not Uraviti. There came a sparkle to eyes and a quick twinge in her heart that skipped a beat. How long had it been since anyone, even her own damn parents, said they needed her as a person more than as a savior? A manic smile found her, wrapping the heroine in the best mixture of nostalgia, relief, escapism, excitement, ambition, and what might have been genuine romantic love. You can count on me, Zuki. I give you my word on it. His reaction wasn't what she expected it to be. Instead of returning the expression to a degree, he appeared more unsettled than anything, with his eyes wide, what might have been confusion and certainly discomfort. Yet he managed a smile, one that was meek and not at the same time. It was charming, to say the least, and Ochako found herself rather spellbound by it as he answered smoothly. I appreciate that, Rosie, but right now I'm more interested in those crazy ideas you have tucked away up there. Like, his face showed a moment of annoyance, likely from how ridiculous it sounded from the outset. How exactly would you go about terraforming Mars? Or hell, what would be one way you could think of making space travel reliable? The crime fighter lapped up the question with a near-debased eagerness as daydreams came back in force. Well, first off, to terraform a planet, we'd need to construct an atmosphere that wouldn't get sucked away into space. So it would be a better idea to first start off with self-sufficient domed or underground cities that work to slowly change the particles of the surface. Then we could use individual quirks along with some weather-based technology to make it more habitable. She noticed a quiet, annoyed twitch behind his teeth that had her giving up the floor for his sake. Smiling, she was interested to hear what he had to say. So, what do you think? Again, there came another silent tick to his mouth that was added to by a curling of his fingers before writing down something in the notebook. His jaw was set tight with bemused and mild anger as he put the notepad on the coffee table and covered his face in his hands. Slowly, he dragged them down, shaking his head in a depressive crash. I think this would be so much fucking easier if Katsuki hadn't... Exhale! He turned his head and studied the woman, taking in every bit of her appearance and complaining, even the slightest bit of information about her. Then he spoke in a cautious, restrained manner, completely at odds with the friendliness of earlier. Please don't take this wrong here, but have you ever wondered what it would have been like to have the original demon's power? Or maybe that's the wrong word, more of, have you ever considered how far he or his successor could have taken humanity if they were so nuts? He forced his gaze up at the ceiling, sounding brash and almost indignant as he continued. I mean, they both had the power to take anyone's quirk and use it as they wished, and also give it to anyone or anything with a brain. They could have made colonies on Mars or built space stations single-handedly, but instead it was wasted twice. Almost all the obstacles would be gone if they hadn't squandered their gift. Then maybe we could be living in one of those books instead. of the bullshit we all got saddled with. He pointed to the row of novels, a scornful glare growing all the while directed at the ceiling. For a second, he collected himself, still very much so mad at whatever it was. It would have been the perfect quirk to make it happen, but now and the only person who might have gone with the idea is burnt to ashes. Ochako squinted at the man, not quite sure what to make of the whole thing. Did Miko talk to you about him? A muffled shrug answered her. Not really. I just can't believe someone with all that power wasted it all on some petty dream of world domination. Maybe Timur, that guy, would have bought into my idea if we had met before he died, or hell, maybe I could have stolen the quirk from him or convinced him to give it to me. Just use that boundless potential for something other than continuing the bullshit we've been set on for centuries. Now that was something she had not expected to hear. Twisting around to look at him, she couldn't help the wave of morbid curiosity. It summoned, after all, no one had ever thought about actually stealing that quirk. Not that it was possible now, but the sheer amount of daring in that was attractive. How exactly would you have stolen his quirk? Walk up and ask him for it. The Greenette shrugged, still brooding on what could have been. Possibly. The guy was mentally ill from the get-go, and from what Himiko explained about him, he was likely vulnerable to those he considered as family, since his only parental figure tried to body snatch him. I could have spun the tale about how he was better off without it, since it still meant he was a slave to his old master in a way, and that it made him lesser. Maybe I could have gaslighted him over months into thinking his father was still in his head somehow, until he rejected the quirk to preserve his sanity, and I come in and offer to take the burden. Maybe I could have talked Himiko into making him think it was wrong to use it and whisper that to the others until he second guesses before he gives it up. His eyes squinted as something not quite right shined behind his eyes. Something hungry, ambitious, calculating, and violent. If talking was lost, then I could have hired myself on after the war as a staff member and used my knowledge of quirks to work my way into his space. Of course, I'd be little more than wallpaper, but eventually I'd find enough information over time to get his routine and, perhaps when he's sleeping, slap suppressor cuffs on him and crack his skull open. With that done, I could reach in and eat his brain's pineal gland. Since that's where the body stores the activation to a person's quirk, to their nervous system, down to their quirk factor, it'd be safe to assume everything about that power is in there. Ergo, it could also be transferred, since that's its natural inclination to assume and project. With me, there's nothing to take, so it'd go to option 2 and give when it can't reproduce. The pen flipped between his fingers, while a malicious grin passed over his lips. It was coupled to a laugh that lacked any mirth, enjoying the picture of suffering it painted. Or better yet, I could have doped his food with LSD and waited until he was mentally breaking down to pop out of the shadows and say, "I can help, but only if you surrender the power which binds you." That'd be one hell of a laugh. There was an element of shocked disgust at the mental images that painted for the heroine, and yet intrigue as well. As horrible as it all sounded, it might have been plausible. No one had ever thought that was even a possibility. But here was someone so dedicated and cunning that it seemed almost realistic. A quiet part of herself, the one that enjoyed looking into darkness to perhaps see the light hidden within, found another question teasing at her lips. What would a perfect world look like to you, Zuki? How would people live in a place like it if you actually had the power to rule? The malice faded from him, confusion taking its place as he turned his head towards her. There's no such thing as a perfect world, no matter how hard you try. It can be improved, but the human condition makes it so that conflict is in our blood. That's always going to be a constant no matter what, even if we do break out into space. Ochako leaned forward on the chair, her chin resting on her hands. Fair enough, but what would be your overarching goal with all that power? What would drive you aside from space travel or hell? Why would you work so hard to get it in that case? The man shrugged nonchalantly, like it was the simplest thing in the world. To make sure that humanity has room to grow, almost all of our conflicts have been over the limited amount of resources we have on this ball of dirt. If you open up the cosmos to the masses, then it's very likely they will have less of a reason to fight. After all, do you think the PLF would have tried to start a war when they could have just gathered up their followers and left for greener pastures on another planet? Or Himiko would have been so tormented by repressing her quirk if other places she could have ran to were known? Anyone who has had any sort of outburst did it purely because they couldn't breathe mentally and assumed they were stuck with the situation they were born with or trapped in. If you open up the stars, then they have an unlimited room to run and thereby avoid a whole lot of bad things. Because what all that represents is hope, and not just hope, but the strongest and most primal of hopes, the hope that things can change for the better. There came a sudden steeliness to his eyes, ones that burned with a lunatic urge to protect and hold in such ferocity that it was almost a force in of itself. Muscles tightened in his core, the animation of his face becoming deadly serious and stone-like as he spoke with the strongest of convictions. To live without hope is to live without purpose, and I know firsthand where that ends. Himiko knows it too, and I'm starting to think you do as well. We aren't special in that regard, not by the slightest. There are billions living in quiet desperation, so that's why this has to work. Because I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing it for her. And I'm doing it for you, and I'm also doing it for every other put-upon person who never got a chance in this shitty world. I work to give hope to those without, and know that on my deathbed, I have done right. He leaned forward to the brunette, his eyes still aflame in the madness, as he spoke with a deep, still tone that stabbed down into the soul. Because it's exactly as Himiko said, I'll be dead and gone one day, so I better make the time I have worth it, and I will be damned if I let her down again. The air took on a quality unlike anything she'd felt in a long time. It was charged with the power of words, yet dangerous in the way a man possessed by drive could make it. She saw fury, resentment, and a drive to protect blazing behind the green presented to her, and even if she wasn't the main one it was directed for, there was still a flattery in being thought of in that. Again, her heart jumped, and her hands grew, clammy as she beheld that spark nestled deep inside him. She adored it with divine reverence and allowed the emotions to swell, taking a moment to appreciate the awe before her. She wanted this. Above all else, she wanted that moment and to see that energy, to harness it as she saw fit in her benevolent designs and to release all he held inside. Smiling, she continued to listen as he turned away to mutter his plans to the paper, proud to mold the life of one so bursting with potential and in turn craft the new world yet to emerge. It was then Ochako knew she had made the right choice, all those months ago, and that this time she wouldn't allow failure nor fate to ruin her plans. Chapter 56. Sorrowful yet optimistic. Himiko curled her knees closer to her chin as she sat with her back in the corner of the living room. She was dressed rather fluffy, like in a big puffy yellow sweater, fur-based pajama pants, and pink socks. It was silly, something she only would have done if she was much younger and before she snapped, yet she wanted to look funny, if only to distract herself. It was just like when she was growing up and needed to focus on anything that wasn't whatever hell she was in, and right now she couldn't find the comparison apt enough. The home was silent save for her own breathing and the light buzz of the air, a state she hadn't known in over a year. Sinking her head down lower, the blonde gathered herself as best she could and tried to hold back the tide of emotions that were so diverse it may as well be bipolar. On one hand, she was filled with this deep, lasting joy that finally, everything fell in her favor. Izuku had accepted her greatest sin of the past. On the other hand, that thought, which was so warm it might very well carry her through the rest of her life, was incredibly weakened when she saw the reality of her current situation. He had left, and she was alone again with absolutely none of the life he drowned her with. She had grown addicted to his love and passion, and the twisted bits in his soul he showed only to her alone. Without it, she had begun to spiral and dread the worst, even if her heart screamed he'd return. Yet again, she shut it all out along with her eyes and whispered the thing he told her to say like an oath. My name is Himiko Midoriya. My name is Himiko Midoriya. My name is Himiko Midoriya. She repeated it until the warmth returned, poorly substituting the fire he stoked deep within her soul. Looking up, she scowled at the ugliness of her home. This wasn't right, this wasn't kind, and it certainly wasn't welcoming. She hated this place, but knew it was one of the only places where she wasn't in constant danger just for being alive. It was her prison, and her sanctuary made lesser by the going of one angelic person who made it change. Her tongue itched and her pores sweated as she focused on the loneliness. She wanted blood, his blood and everything else that came with it. She wanted to hold him down and bite deep into those marks she made and hear him scream in painful ecstasy as she worked her magic on him. She wanted to become him and know that they were close in some sense. She wanted to feel his strong hands on her again and see that spark in his soul flame at her being. She wanted to know his love again. Then came an onslaught of guilt and even dread at the thought of how badly he must be doing without her. Zuzu might have more going on than when they first met, but that terror still filled her. The only person she had left being taken from her by this sick and rotten world. Blood flooded to her ears and her breath was flattened. Panic consumed her veins, and it climaxed with that sharp pinprick of loss that would stain her forever. Her fingers flexed around her legs as she could still feel the weight of the clone's body in her arms, even now. It still hurt just as much to lose one of the few members of her family, and now the person she loved, genuinely loved as much as a monster like her could, was alone and vulnerable. It was because she didn't try hard enough to keep everyone safe that they died. And now she only had that one adorable, handsome, crazy man in this whole world. Chiki could take care of herself well enough, but Zuzu was so damn naive and slow. She wanted him near her, and to know he's okay. But then she inhaled and forced herself to stand from the floor. It was hard, but she eventually made it to the kitchen and began to make herself a tall cup of crimson. Flipping the stove on and pouring the 12 ounces into the saucepan over the front right burner, the murderer was greeted with the alluring smell of copper and iron that teased her fraying nerves. Yet there also came a pang of hurt when she couldn't feel his eyes regarding her with that usual casualness. Pushing the pain away, Himiko waited a few minutes until it was just right and poured it into the big Tupperware cup she kept on hand. Taking a few gulps of the blood made her feel better, but the root cause of her issues was still there, or rather wasn't. There was a solace in the blood, but she needed other things. She needed him. Thinking about it, how did she ever get along without him? It had been so long that she genuinely forgot what it was like to be trapped in here, trading. A concrete cage for one made of drywall and carpet with no one but her mind for company. That was one fate even worse than death to her. Continuing to sip on the swine blood, she felt it take the edge off enough that she contemplated turning on the TV to drift away into someone else's problems. But she wanted to talk to someone. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out her phone and opened the contacts. Izuku's number was right there at the top, just below Chiki, Shoto, and Dr. Nagshi. All it would take was one quick flick of her finger and they'd be talking again. But she forced herself to scroll down. He said he needed time after all, so she'd do as he wished. Looking down, she found the number of delivery places and blood banks and her actual bank. Nobody willing to have an actual conversation when she was like this. However, near the very bottom, she saw a name she forgot was put in. It was Inko's. Pausing. For a moment, she considered if that would even remotely be a good idea. But then she realized that maybe she needed a different perspective of someone that couldn't throw her back into Tartarus. Thinking back, she recalled that she still had that other girl's number, Natsumi, if she was right, inside one of her old pants. Still, if anyone knew Izuku, it was his mother. So even if it was unpleasant, she might learn something to make herself a little less shitty. Deciding that it was better than utter solitude, Himiko tapped the number and waited for it to connect. Seconds later, she was met by an uptight and sharp voice that hit like a punch. Hello? The blonde gathered what strength she had and mustered a weak smile, sounding as vulnerable as she was. Hey Inko, it's Himiko. Sorry to bother you, but if you have some time, would you mind if we talked for a while? Nothing came through the speakers for a moment, then a deep, thin sigh answered back. The voice was authoritative and judgmental, but it lacked a sense of outright contempt. Sure, isn't like I have anything to do anyway. So how's my son treating you? He hasn't gotten up to anything crazy, has he? The girl forced out a reedy laugh and looked to the side as her self-consciousness slammed itself on her. Well, he's doing okay, but lately he's been more erratic. There was a note of investigative interest in the response that coupled with an audible assumption under the words, How so? He hasn't hurt you, has he? Himiko jumped up, waving her free hand spastically. To dissuade that assumption right off the bat. No, nothing like that. She paused as she remembered the passion and madness in those green eyes when he slammed her against the wall and kissed her deep enough to steal her soul. His hands rushed to claim what was his alone, while she was left at his whims to swirl, in that heat that connected them indefinitely. started to be a lot more forward about what he wants. He always talked about us having kids and getting married, but until last week, those were just talk. Now I can see it burn a hole in him like an addiction, if that's the right way to put it. He grabbed me and kissed me and said he loved me, and She sighed at her own despair and shook her head. Inko, the reason I called is to ask if you think I'm having a good effect on him. Because I know I'm nuts, but it's like I keep pulling that part out of him somehow, and it just keeps growing. The mother listened silently and said nothing for a minute before she answered in a far more relaxed and accepting tone, even bordering on the edge of jovial. Dear, we're all a little crazy. The bitch you see in him, it's always been there, and Izuku has too much of myself and his father in him, so he's always going to be driven by passion. You aren't making it worse, you're just helping him get it out. Himiko wasn't sure exactly how to take that information, as all her other anxieties came back in full. But inhale. Inko, can I be honest with you? I have no idea what I'm doing. I know I love him just as much as he loves me, yet I don't know what to do. My parents never showed me how to build a happy life, and Izuku is the first person that I actively want to make something with. I don't know how to cook or any of that stuff, much less start a family. If I should even have a kid with a quirk, like mine, I just want to do right by him because he deserves as much. A chuckle came from the phone and practically snapped the girl out of her dread while the older woman spoke. Nothing about relationships is easy, sweetheart, especially if you're dealing with someone like Izuku. The fact alone he's spent so long with you means you have to be doing something right. And believe me, Izuku is a lot of things, but he'll speak. Pay up if anything bothers him. That being said, what exactly do you want your life with him to be like? Himiko didn't really know what to say to that. I don't know. I mean, I already have everything I want and I've never had any big goals. It was always hoping to make it through to the next day. All I ever wanted was acceptance and love, and he gives that to me in spades. Aside from that, I'm not exactly content, but at peace with our lot. A slight hum answered her, which was laced with a blooming curiosity that only an old woman could. Possess? You mean to say you don't want anything else? Not a bigger home, more money, more dates with him? The girl couldn't help but mentally shrug at the suggestions. No, I'm perfectly fine with where our lives are. Inko, you need to remember I was homeless for years and abused throughout my childhood. The sheer fact I have a safe place to continually live at with a man who genuinely adores me and a steady stream of income is more than I could have hoped for. The green-haired woman said nothing once more for a moment before speaking with what had to be something between pity and concern. Oh, honey, do you need any help? Himiko couldn't help but smile at the noise. It sounded so much like Izuku in that cute, bawling way that cut down to the soul in concern. She was certainly his mother, that was for sure. Nah, I'm fine so long as I have Greenie next to me. I don't really need a lot, the whimpering continued from Inko, to the point it was like verbally nuzzling into her neck to try and rid whatever was wrong. And that's fine, but maybe I could take you somewhere? Give you a taste of something new and all. That. A laugh actually answered the woman as the slasher couldn't stop herself from finding it all so silly. I appreciate it, but I like being a shut-in. There's less bullshit that way and nobody bothers me. If I ever need something, I can just order. It and my job lets me work from home so I can never bother with the outside and all the bad stuff. Inko answered back with pity shining in her voice that made the blonde feel somewhat better. That isn't healthy. You still need to go outside every so often. Again, Himiko was left shrugging, as the concept seemed null at this point. I know, but after all I've been through, I have seen enough of life. I just want peace and quiet with Izuku by my side. The rest of all that bullshit can turn to dust for all I care. She paused for a minute as something struck her mind. Himiko didn't want a lot in life. It was arguable to say if she ever did. But there was a fantasy she had ever since the day she reformed. Granted, with everything that she got after the crime she committed, it was downright foolish to ask for more, and yet she did. There was never that strong of a reason when she was alone, since it would have left her in a place that would likely spiral back to almost the same path she left behind from desperation. Now, however, she had an anchor to help bear the burden and keep her sane, someone she could actually build a life with, however plain and boring it would be. She could live again without the ghosts and hatred hanging over her shoulders and be just a normal person with the man she treasured. I've thought about moving to America every once in a blue moon. Somewhere like New York City or Chicago where it wouldn't be that different from home. Of course, that'd only be until I saved up some money to move to some backwater where nobody would bug me, maybe someplace like Wyoming. Now there came a detectable amount of anger from the older woman as her voice became far harsher. Young lady, what the hell would be over there that you couldn't have over here? Homes are extremely cheap nowadays after that whole mess with the calamity reset the market back 40 years, and there's plenty of rural communities that you could settle in. Don't go assuming the grass is greener just because you got tired of seeing this stuff in front of you. The blonde narrowed her eyes for a moment but sighed as she realized what was actually happening. Inko wasn't mad for her wanting to move. It was more likely that she was afraid Izuku would go with her, and to be fair, that was a central part of her plan. But it was a pipe dream. The government and the commission would never let her leave the country legally and being expelled back, as an illegal immigrant would mean a life sentence in Tararuas. She avoided 10 of those and barely got out by the skin of her teeth, and that was mostly because the commission wanted to use her as a reform experiment. Granted, if she really did want to gamble all that away, she still had some resources that could make it work. Grian was well connected enough that she could assume a new identity that would be registered overseas, and there were still caches from the war that her side used that never got touched. Although she only had locations for 10 of them, and Skeptic had hundreds all over the country, and a few in China and Korea, it was almost enough to make her wish she kept in touch with the guy. But after Tamura went kaboom, he had gone completely underground with the rest of them. That made her question if he was still alive and if he gave up the whole liberation thing. Not that it mattered, of course. She wasn't nearly that dumb after all the beatings life handed her. It was better to be content with what she had, and in truth, she did have everything she wanted. A home where no one hurt her or considered her a monster with nobody coming to kill her, and someone who loved her for all her flaws. Pausing for a moment, she questioned just how much her life was altered by showing her parents that damn bird or not running away before she snapped. She had everything she wanted, and it could be afforded on what was essentially welfare money and some cooch thrown at the guy she loved. She could have had all this so much easier and earlier if she had just been taken care of and showed up at the right place before she developed that damn mask. Why the fuck did her? Right, because her dad couldn't keep his dick in his pants and wound up having an affair with some woman she never even met that resulted in her being born. Damn, she was screwed over from day one, wasn't she? Himiko inhaled and relaxed. Fuck 'em. They're all either dead or being miserable somewhere else while she was happy with the person she loved, or rather she should be. Sighing a bit, she raised the phone up and said something that bothered her like a needle through the skin. Inko, Izuku isn't here and it's bugging me. The man's mother paused for a moment and weighed in a fair amount of her voice. What exactly do you mean by that, sweetie? Himiko chewed her lip at what she had to say, but it was better for him if she had more voices on what to do. A couple. Days ago, Izuku said some disturbing things on my account and decided he needed to get his head checked out because of it. There was an accusation a mile long in the brunette's voice. Things such as, suddenly the girl wished she could disappear from existence for an hour or pull the memory of what she just said out of reality. Curling more into her knees, the villainess tried to sort out what to say, that he wanted to be able to pull out his heart and let me eat it, along with a few other things like it. Silence reigned over the air with neither speaking as the sword hung high. Then a heartbeat later, it came down with 8 damning words. What have you been doing to my son? She wanted to panic, yet somehow she almost shared in the disgust and fury the woman had at herself. So instead, her voice was calm and concerned because that was what Izuku needed, not some bitch who broke under pressure. That's the thing, I haven't. I've only brought a knife into our bed once, and even then it was just little surface-level cuts, like you would make for a large blood sample. Nothing that wouldn't immediately clout and seal on its own. I have never even suggested something like that because he means so damn much to me. It's that he views it as fully loving me and wants to take everything to the most extreme if he could. Needless to say, that scared the fuck out of me, but it was just talk, and he recognized how crazy that sounded. Which is why I asked if I'm doing right by him. She shook her head as the facts played out before her like curses and continued. I love him, Inko, more than anyone before. It's why I'm so damn protective of him, because he's all I have left after life kept screwing me over. I know I'm better with him, and to an extent he is with me, but most people don't have my issues or kinks, and that's why I asked him if he'd be better off with someone else instead of going crazy for my sake. But he refuses every damn time even. when he has way easier options and he'll always double down on his convictions towards me if I say anything? For fuck's sake, he outright demanded I become his wife because I did. He just won't let go, and I don't want him to. But I don't want him losing his mind because of me. Again, silence came from the woman as the killer prayed she'd have the answer on what would be best for that wonderful angel, only to receive a heavy, soul-bearing sigh laden with melancholy. Himiko, none of this is your fault. I appreciate you telling me all this, but what's going on with him is no different than what went on with me and his father. Izuku inherited a lot of my obsessive tendencies, and I'd likely had said the same thing if his father was of your persuasion. We're very manic people, you see, and what he's doing. The best way to describe it is as a form of submissive control. There's probably another name for it, but that's what I've heard it called. Basically, he wants to entrap you by tending to your every need and desire so you become dependent. I did the same thing with Hisashi. Inko hesitated for a second as a lingering dread filled her voice. Himiko, would you consider yourself as damaged? If that's even the right word. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the almost palpable fear in the statement, not sure what to make of it. I have issues, but I'm not damaged. The mother cut in with an insistence heavy in her soul, taking the girl off guard. But you never really fit in anywhere. You were ostracized and struck out because of it. All the while, you wanted someone who you could have helped shoulder the burden, someone to understand you for who you were instead of what others wanted you to be. Now this was getting weird, scarily weird. Yes. Why? She could swear she smelled nervous sweat on the other side of the phone. Because his father was the exact same way. Hisashi was a villain when we were growing up, a reformed one, but still. And I clung to him because I wanted to feel needed and know this person was as empty without me as I was without him. I chose him because nobody else wanted him and that he was mine, and I was willing to do anything to keep him for it. That's why I got a job as a nurse and cooked the meals and ran him silly every chance I could. I loved him just as strongly as you're describing what Izuku has for you, but there was always an element of control in it for me. She went on in a slight hysteria of what was said. I reveled in the fact I was keeping him happy and fed and satisfied. I wanted to be everything to him because I kept him standing and he gave me a reason to keep going, to never give up. During our entire time together, I knew for a damn fact I'd do horrible things if he needed me to without hesitation. But like you, he'd never ask that. It was only when he tried to run away after Izuku was born that things went bad. He loved him dearly, but he said it would be better if he wasn't raised around a criminal. He doubted himself no matter what I said, and eventually, she spoke like it hurt to say. I snapped and ended up nearly killing him one night when he was packing his bags. I wasn't trying to go that far, but I knew that he'd die without me too. Keep him centered. So I used my quirk and pulled something in his brain by accident. The only reason I didn't get arrested was because he refused to press charges, and after that, he snuck away one night while I was sleeping. There was a reason he went overseas. It was because he knew I'd hunt him down if he was still here. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It took a moment for Himiko to fully process all that was said, suddenly feeling like her heart had stopped in ice. What exactly are you trying to get across here? Are you saying Izuku needs... Inko interrupted with a shout that was fraught with desperation. No, I'm saying it isn't your fault. None of this is. Maybe it's my family's fate, or maybe some trick of the gods, but I'm telling you to be careful. I don't want what happened to us to follow you too, so please let me know if he gets out of hand. I don't want him blaming himself for the rest of his life like I do. The shouting turned into sobbing, leaving Himiko sitting in the corner listening to this woman wail in emotional agony over what she lost, all while she tried to not picture how incredibly likely a similar story could happen for them both, only with a far worse ending given her track record with fate. She could see that fucking thing in his eyes staring back at her just like it did in that warehouse. Oppressive, suffocating, and so maliciously driven as to be unstoppable. Izuku would never hurt her, but he'd have no quarrel about trapping her somewhere if he believed it was for her own good. Even now that look, it gave her chills. Not even Tamura seemed so gone as the thing inside Zuzu. Her mind wandered, and she could see in her head a flash of something dreadful that turned her heart to ice. It was Izuku standing over a pile of bodies with a bloody hammer, smiling at her like everything was right in the world again, despite the crimson staining his face. He would do that. He'd do it and more if she so much as complained about someone. What's worse is that he'd be able to succeed and keep doing it again and again until she was happy, because that thing was in him. Himiko looked down at her hands to find them shaking. He'd admitted to almost going down that route if it wasn't for her, so it was all on her now. She had to keep straight and not fuck up like when she was a teen or people would die, lots of people. Breathing, the villain found herself nearly having a full-blown panic attack. Izuku would sacrifice his life for her and throw it all away just like Jin did. Only all that sweetness and warmth he had would be burned in her name. Yet it was then she saw the almost stupidly simple answer and laughed hysterically over the phone. Guess I have to be happy, and nothing bad will happen. The crying ceased with Inko sniffling at her words. The oddly manic sensation of this epiphany made everything else seem irrelevant and manageable with just that one string of logic. Thus Himiko felt like a cork had been taken out of her brain, and actually smiled while Inko spoke up at last with a raw and scratchy voice. You don't have to be like that, honey. She was interrupted by the younger woman still drunk, off her clarity. It's because I keep worrying and doubting that things keep getting worse. It's my fault for not reassuring Izuku that I love him, like he does me, so I need to be happy with what we have instead of going through the motions of being anxious half the time. I survived everything else life threw at me and gave me him as a blessing, so I just need to start acting like it. I need to dance and play and wrestle and squeeze with him instead of just glaring at the rest of the world, because everything I do affects him too. More silence answered back, but eventually it ended with Inko sounding oddly defeated and forlorn. You can't fix everything that way since he'll still have my problems, but it'll certainly help. Just take care of yourselves, all right? You're a good girl, Himiko, and for what it's worth. I'm sorry I acted like I did. I just didn't want Izuku making the same mistakes I did. Himiko pursed her lips and found a question that had been burning for a while that was awkward in the extreme. Did you ever regret your marriage? Inko laughed like that was foolish to even assume. Not for a second. Hisashi was everything I wanted in a man, and he'd let me be as I wanted to be. Clingy, crazy bitch and all. I loved that man more than life itself until Izuku was born. After that, he came as a very close second place. Don't get me wrong, it was difficult, especially with Hisashi's record, his anger issues, and the guilt between them. But it's when times are tough that you know how strong your love is, and he loved me just as hard. Truth be told, I'd give anything to have him back. Funny as it is to say after all this time, but I never moved on even after all these years, which is why I never dated. For some reason, this took the girl aback at the claim. Hold up, you mean to tell me that after 20 years of him being gone, you never dated anyone? I get being in love, but for that long? The woman chuckled like it was old news. He was special to me, always has been. Although I almost did with this one gentleman by the name of Toshinori. He was a disabled fella who lived around the area at the time, looked almost exactly like a living skeleton. It was never anything more than maybe going for coffee to make small talk, but he had such a passion for helping other people, and just this charm to him that it almost made me consider moving on. Himiko blinked as she remembered the name and precisely who it belonged to. What exactly happened to stop you two from becoming an item? The answer was blunt, like there was nothing much to it. He said he had to move away to train some student of his that an old associate picked out for him. Typical law enforcement stuff. She could not believe the coincidence and how all this played together by such a paper-thin margin. But what could be done at this point? Okay, I think I'm gonna sign off. Thanks for talking with me. I appreciate it. A measure of the warmth. In the mother's voice that failed to crack the bewilderment of her son's lover. Anytime, dear. Just keep yourself together and thank you for helping Izuku. As much as I hate to admit it, he wasn't nearly as happy before you came into his life. That ended the call, which left Himiko staring up at the pictures of her family, knowing all too well that she'd have to grow as a person once more, because she couldn't afford to lose what she had this time around, and she'd be damned before that happened.
Chapter 57. Familiar bonds. The sky was clear above as Izuku clung to the dangling hand ring above him in the tram with the casual disinterest of the drone worker. His notes for the Starward expansion intuitive had grown plenty, and Ochako was actually willing to humor him. So it was going well. However, he couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of melancholy that ate away at his soul for the past 3 days. It was hard to admit, but he missed her badly. Sure, he had the intuitive to throw himself at as a proxy in order to distract himself. Yet that manic high had come down hard recently. One moment he was certain that he'd designed some grand plan of action to lift humanity into a new age. The next, he was struggling to get out of bed and not cry himself back to sleep. It bothered him how much he depended on Himiko to keep him grounded. But she always gave him a reason to get up. Now, intangible things like dreams didn't do exactly the same. Yet it wasn't like they had split. She was still waiting for him, and it had only been a couple days. However, he still questioned if he should. He had no doubt he wanted to go back to her and kick all her past crimes to the side. But he wasn't sure if that was a problem or not. Matter of fact, he had half a mind to turn around, walk straight into her apartment, and take her where she stood like he always desired. She was a sadistic ex-murderer who nearly helped take down modern society and brutally tortured those she loved, who rejected her true nature. And yet he honestly didn't care. The souls of those people who more than likely could have been him. Be damned. She wasn't that same person and did her best to reform when by all rights she should have been dead and burned years ago. The world at large seemed to wish it so, and yet Himiko spat in their faces and proved them wrong. In a fucked up way, Izuku found that so alluring, but still, he loved her with every fiber of his being, and she had been loyal and devoted in spades. She was everything he wanted in a woman, aside from the blood fetish. The only thing keeping at odds with that emotion was himself, cause he wasn't sure if his mind hadn't gone wrong from half the shit he did, or if following these feelings would spiral into disaster. Part of him wanted to scream to hell with it and just enrapture the woman in his love like he so badly wanted. But the thing was that he didn't know himself well enough to trust that urge. He wasn't like Himiko, where his urges were painful. But in a way, it scared him how much sway the feelings had on him. He wanted to be everything to Himiko, and just consume all her desires and needs until she was in perpetual bliss by his deeds. To have her rolled up with every ounce of pleasure and security he gave until she knew how deeply his adoration and worship went. In a way, he simply wanted to eat her whole with his love and have her coiled around his safe warm finger like she had done for him at his lowest. Yet with that came some dark and uncomfortable things that pushed to be let out. To shift the world until it was perfect for her. He knew a part of him wanted to lock her away in some paradise he created where no worry or hurt could touch her. But that was impossible, for now at least. The urges came every so often, but there wasn't much that made him want to hide her away, given how she lived. He wasn't sure what that said about him as a person, but he loved having her close at all times. After all, she was a great person to him and did nothing other than bring good into his life. Oh, ever mundane it was. Izuku couldn't pinpoint exactly what about Himiko drove him so mad, be it her beauty, courage, tenacity, neediness, or perhaps even her violent tendencies. Namely because he couldn't point out only one thing about her, and now he was by himself again, just as he was when he was at his lowest. It was then he had to fight himself from going to the back and redirecting his destination to her block, taking a moment to breathe. The quirkless man was left having to strap his mask on tight and find some gladness in the fact the workday was over. At least that gave him time to chew away at that almost self-resentful burning in his soul. Eventually, his original stop came by, and he got off a block from his apartment, finding the whole world far less bright as he marched back to the only place he could privately vent. A few minutes later, he had made it inside the sanctuary of his home, only to be met with damning silence. Where once there was the buzz of life rather than the make of a tomb. He scowled at the walls, throwing every ounce of his hate and pain behind his stone-like gaze before settling himself on the sofa. A twitch came from his fingers as he fought the need to run back screaming into her arms. So instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a fresh notebook for the intuitive. 5 minutes into it, and there was suddenly a ring from his phone. Pulling it out, he was mildly surprised to see it was his mother. Sure, what else to do? He shrugged and put it to his ear. Hello? Inko's voice came out in that sweetly warm way she got when in either a good mood or something horrible had happened as a way to mask it. Needless to say, it failed to put him at ease when she spoke. Hey honey, I haven't heard from you in a while and figured you wouldn't mind if we talked for a bit? He shrugged, spinning the pen in his left hand absent-mindedly. Sure, but be honest with me, Mom. Is there something going on that made you decide to call me? The response wasn't instant, which said exactly what he thought, yet she still kept on that sweet exterior. Well, I got a call from Himiko yesterday, and she explained the situation you two are in, so I figured you'd want someone to talk to. The pen dropped from his hand as his brain began to run at thousands of miles an hour. Nobody could have made Himiko contact his mother of all people, so assuming it's true, which it likely is given who his mother is, she did it of her own free will. Secondly, there wasn't a chance in hell that Himiko explained exactly why he needed to leave for a while. So some abbreviation had to be involved. Yet, why would she even reach out like that in the first place, instead of calling Okako? Weren't they close enough to talk about this stuff? Clearing his throat, Izuku decided to fish a little to see what she knew exactly. Talk about what in particular, Mama? There was a slight creak to his voice, one he knew she'd take note of immediately. Yet to his surprise, she didn't sound authoritarian from that few decimal shifts he expected. Instead, she sounded almost sympathetic, with that same soft voice that kept monsters and villains away when he was a child, yet at the same time, not belittling either. Hugh, see, Himiko explained a bit about some of the things you said to her. Now, sweetie, I understand where you're coming from, and we all know you're not that destructive. But, do you ever feel like nothing you do for her is enough? That even if she isn't asking for anything more, it feels wrong not to give everything you can. Izuku shifted uncomfortably in his seat, finding himself feeling almost exposed by his mother's words. Kind of, why? There came a begrudging tone that was laced with a deep sadness right down to the core that unsettled him even more than if she started berating him. Because I was the same way with your father. I loved that man so much that I'd do anything for him. Granted, he wasn't like Himiko is with her tastes. But I would have done it if he was. Izuku, I called to let you know what you're feeling and how strong it is completely normal for our family. When we find someone we love, we hold on tight and don't let go even if it kills us. The man dragged a hand over his face and exhaled with all due pain at having his life prodded into. It wasn't exactly embarrassment or shame. Rather, he just felt exhausted, like he had lost all means to keep up a facade anymore. What Himiko and I have isn't the healthiest, but I wouldn't have anything else or anyone else. She's loyal, caring, and strong in a way most people aren't. I know she's nuts, but that's why we get along so well. I just question if I'm the crazier one for being so enthralled by her. He was silent for a moment as a thought creeped into his mind, one he never would have considered asking under any other circumstance. Double quotes, Mom, hypothetically, if Dad had asked you to end someone, or more to the point, you suspected it would be better for him if a vast sway of people were dead. Would you do it? Inko was silent in turn, but he noted an honesty in her response that almost felt comforting. If he asked, I'd have to make sure it'd be for a damn good reason. If he was in danger or someone was screwing him over, without hesitation, even if he told me to do otherwise. For some reason, that left Izuku feeling oddly numb as his hands slackened on his phone. The world isn't a kind place, is it, Mom? The exact same sort of emotion was felt in his mother's words, making him listen when she went on quietly. Not at all, sweetie. It'll chew anyone up and spit them out completely destroyed. That's sad. We can't control it all, but that's what the old saying, there's no place like home, is for. A sharp pang came at how empty his dwelling was, but still he felt almost hypnotized by everything. Causing his words to slip out in droves. But even if you have a home, it can still be burned or smashed by everything outside, and everything you love can go with it. Even if you struggle and fight to maintain it, The world can still squash everyone like a bug. Maybe it would be better if we just left the planet like in all those movies. After all, nobody can bother you in space. Soft chuckling came from the line as Inko mimicked his tone, likely finding herself adrift in her exhaustion of the spirit. Even if that were possible, there'd still be problems and time. Takes everything eventually. Asterisk, he scowled at her words like they were the worst of profanities. Then why not fight against it? There was one person who could have done anything, so why couldn't that happen again? Why does everything have to end and be in danger? Inko verbally shrugged, with a deflection clear in her intent. Such is life, Izuku. The world took your father from me, and one day it'll take me from you, and then one day when you have kids, time will snatch you away from them, and all you hold dear. It's always been that way since we figured out what things were, and it will continue to be that way until the end. Veins pumped in his forehead as he fought to keep himself from yelling in his fury at creation. No, it doesn't. We literally have a drug that can affect the flow of time on a living creature. You can defy the very laws of physics with your mind, and that American heroine could literally say something and it'd become a temporary law of reality. We aren't just pawns of creation set to flicker and die, Mom. Things don't have to end like always. The woman was completely unaffected by her son's calm outburst and added a slight edge to her tone. Maybe, but things always change, Izuku, even if they're supposedly permanent, like the mountains. All you can do is accept the truth and adapt. There came a spark from within him, one that he knew, but hardly touched. It crawled over him like a virus and made him speak in something worse than venom. Every one of his decrees holds a grave threat right under the surface of civility. That truth is made by people and things do remain as they are, so long as they're maintained diligently against anything. Anyone who does otherwise doesn't deserve anything worth preserving, and I am certainly not that. Ka answered him as his mother held a far deeper sympathy that struck a nerve somehow. What would you do if you lost that thing worth preserving? Not because you didn't have a partner to maintain it who'd abandon you, but just because they died due to health complications or got taken by higher forces for a justifiable reason. His scowl slackened as the feeling came back in strength, granting a strange clarity that made him speak without hesitation. If that partner who helped me maintain such a beautiful thing was taken, justifiable or not, I'd throw all my wrath at those who took them regardless of the consequences. If they died, I'd follow after without a second thought because what else is there? What more could be maintained other than a deep, sinking emptiness in that solitude from the one person who understands? Who needs me to make something better than one person can make alone? Again, Inko was silent, yet instead of sounding horrified, she sounded casually unshaken, like she was expecting that. You really are our son. So have you thought about starting a family before next year? That sort of question threw him off kilter for a moment, before the answer slipped past him, coming out as easily as if he was asked what color was the sky. Diligently, but she has reservations about it because of her quirk and record. Though I've only brought up that whole idea, 3 times. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have kids with her, but ... Well, it's more a question of if we should. Suddenly, there was a hint of condescension in his mother's voice that almost made him groan. Neither of you are getting younger, and every year you wait, it'll be harder for her to conceive. So you might want to bite that bullet before it flies away. That being said, a pause and a sigh came that ushered back a softer feeling to her. One that was both motherly and the sort of weariness only a person who had seen years of pain could carry. Double quotes. ... Is there anything I can do to help you both? Does she need blood? Because I can set her up with my hospital. Or do you need some help with work? Deku curled his fingers into a tight fist with his discomfort still strong. She's got plenty of blood since the government pays for it. Matter of fact, it's remarkable how cheap it is since nobody wants animal vita. As for me, Mom, I honestly just want to know I'm not making her mental health worse. Or if I'm just a drag on her with being so crazy. Like ... Am I being a good partner? I always put her first and do whatever I can for her. but even then it feels lacking. Like nothing I ever do will be enough to show just how much she means to me. Inko's worry lessened somewhat at his words, and came through with a warmth that admittedly made him feel better. You're doing enough, Izuku. The fact she talks about you in such a loving way proves it. From what I gather, she's just a bit more mature than most. Look, how about you both come to my place tomorrow, and I'll make us all some dinner. I'll even make that nice pork belly katsudon you like. That way we can all just clear the waters and move on from this silliness. That made him pause, as guilt, fury, and shame wrapped around his passion-fueled madness, causing him to wish he could dive back into the safety of building his grand idea when that wonderful woman invaded his mind like a disease. Mom, that sounds nice, but he shut his with dread tension hanging over him like a blade. He inhaled, hoping to the god of fate and luck that he wasn't about to betray Himiko's trust. I'm going to tell you something very damning, and I need you to swear to me that you'll keep it secret. Don't tell anyone, not Aunt Mitsuki, or Kakon, or anyone. She's already served her time for it, and the courts and the HPSC all say she's reformed. Understand? His mother answered back with an unnerving casualness about herself, like it was always a blatant truth that only now he deemed to know. She killed people for their blood back in her youth before she became reformed. Is that what you're going to tell me? All the air fled from his lungs, and Izuku was left utterly speechless as he turned his head towards the phone. How did Inko laughed with a slight edge of aged, petty malice that only a person with decades upon decades of life could have. Sweetheart, I've been a medical professional for longer than you've been alive, and I've seen plenty of folks with the same sort of issues. You think she's the first to ever snap due to not satisfying her quirk's needs while being that high on the scale? There were people in my practice who needed to come in daily for calcium transplants because otherwise they'd start devouring bones? I know I was harsh on her when we first met, but that was only because I figured something like that would follow her around. But at this point, it's a lot more manageable. Are you conflicted because you still feel the exact same? For her, despite what she did to those people, the truth weighed on his body like an anvil, but still he found yet more shame as what came next seemed to want to come out. Double quotes, yes, but that isn't just it. Wanted to be those people, not in the sense that I want her to gut me. Instead, I wanted to be that person she could come to for her urges. In a way I am, but recently, I keep wishing I had a quirk like Vlad, King, that let me have unlimited blood in my body and regenerate so she could do whatever she wanted without worry. No, she doesn't want that. That she's fine with exactly how I am, but I want to be perfect for her. So much so that I get jealous of dead people for taking her eye before we met. There was a second of silence before Inko said anything. Yet, instead of the horror or disgust or concern her son expected, she sounded actually understanding. I see. Well, that can be jarring for most people. As I said, if Hisashi was the same way, I'd be thinking the same way. There's nothing wrong with you, Izuku. We're just very devotional people, even to that extreme. For some reason, that made him feel worse. If she had given one of her usual condemnation of his stupidity, or even just tried to explain to him that toning it down a little was in order, then he'd be more secure that he wasn't acting like a lovesick madman. He knew without a doubt he loved Himiko, but that might be a problem with how deeply he returned her bloody passions. Pain in itself didn't do anything for him. It was more that he was used to it so much that he was numb, which made the pleasure afterwards all the better. But again, they weren't one in the same for him. Yet the romantic ideal of granting her all his Veda and seeing her roll in ecstasy because of him, like she had that one night, was beyond incredible. At this point, he felt it was pointless to fight against those emotions that gripped his soul like a vice. She was loving, strong, and devoted beyond measure, despite also being that villain who ended so many. There was no way out, and he'd sooner be dead than have anyone or anything take her away from him, and he knew it down to his core. Sighing, he shifted his eyes to the ceiling as his soul and whatever else dwelled inside it practically laughed in triumph. Does it ever get to the point where you're not ready to rip out someone's throat for their sake? Again, Inko laughed, sounding every bit like the jolly and slightly wisecracking mother he knew, alongside the controlling and petty woman she was. Nope, I still think about your father almost every day and consider getting revenge on the bastards that took him from us, even after so long. You're gonna be no different, sweetie, and for what it's worth, I was wrong about Himiko. So long as she doesn't betray you, I'll consider her one of us. How about tomorrow you both show up and we all have a nice dinner? I know you're both dying to see each other. Izuku continued to stare up at the ceiling, not sure what would be best for the two of them. When he asked one question he desperately wanted to ask someone. Mom, you'd tell me if I was doing anything wrong, right? The older woman still sounded as warm and comforting as when he was a kid, taking away the burden upon him. I would, but I'm not infallible. I make mistakes and misjudgments, just like everyone else. I considered your relationship with Himiko to be the wrong thing to do, and in some regards it is, but nothing's ever perfect. You stuck by her for over a year without me over your shoulder, and she does the same for you. I'm surprised by that, to be honest, but I'm glad to be wrong here for once. And I trust you enough to view things for how they are by this point. When the butterflies had left and you still say she's the one you want, that's enough for me. I'll see you tomorrow at 4. There wasn't anything more he could say at this point, feeling as raw and torn as a fresh bite on his neck, and yet also bandaged and treated at the same time. He was concerned how he'd react to seeing Himiko again, namely because the very first thing that popped into his mind was scooping her up where she stood and taking her like the last they were face to face. Yet he had a higher purpose now, and with her at his side again, maybe it could reach a level he never considered before. All right, see you tomorrow. Asterisk, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sad to say that is the end of the story. But I'm happy to finally finish the official start to this channel and move on to new things. I will be making a video soon, personally thanking every single supporter that's still here, and I'll be getting as many videos as I can for you all from here on out. There will be many great changes coming, just you wait. Thank you for sticking around, and let me know what you want to see next in the comments below. Willy, what if, signing out.